In recent years, we've seen a number of targeted violent attacks on communities of color. We know that all of us as Americans are entitled to certain fundamental rights. And yet, Black Americans are continuously grappling with the threat of violent white supremacy. How do we make sense of this discrepancy between these unalienable rights and the violence that Black Americans in particular face in this country?
As a political scientist, we have to be honest about the history and the foundation of this nation, which was never set up for equality for Black people. And so when we think about white supremacy, anti-Black racism, patriarchy, capitalism, as Bell Hooks has laid out for us, we know that the promise of the American dream has always been just that. And we've chipped away at it. And, Black Americans have been some of the greatest patriots, if not the greatest patriots for this country. But we're still very, very far from the ideals that the founding fathers laid out.
The part of how you can justify excluding Black people from democracy, from freedom, and how you can justify exploiting their labor through slavery is by creating myths around who they are. We're not moral enough. We're excessively violent. We're not smart enough. We're not trustworthy enough. We're hypersexual. We are a public threat to white people. So that logic has guided white supremacist thought in America since the beginning. When that's how you see us and that's how you think about us, it's always going to make an ordinary interaction turn into an extraordinary spectacle of violence, which is what you see so often in America.
What are some issues around election fairness or voter skepticism that you've seen looking ahead to next year's election?
I've been hearing a lot that gerrymandering, voter suppression, voter fraud, election integrity are absolutely top of mind. Recent polls from the Associated Press Newark Center also corroborate this. And we've seen that Democrats are more concerned with gerrymandering and voter suppression, while Republicans are more concerned with voter fraud. I've also been hearing about difficulty reaching the ballot box. We've seen in states like Texas, Georgia, Florida, that they've tried to implement and increase criminal penalties, making it harder for people to assist voters to vote, which really impacts minority voters in particular. And it causes confusion, causes fear, fuels that skepticism.
It's really about getting out the vote, but also educating people about the real issues. So often when people are unheard or feel unconsidered, that creates the, oh, well, they've already decided this. It's already in the bag for the other person. And that's not necessarily unique to Black Americans, but it's especially true when we see over and over again our cries for legislative relief when it comes to things like violence, when it comes to things like misrepresentation or lack of representation. When we don't see legislative change, we actually do believe that our vote doesn't matter. But the truth is the opposite. The fact is the opposite.
How are misrepresentations and misunderstandings of how race is taught in schools affecting students around the country?
If students don't understand the history of school segregation, if they don't understand the history of redlining and why certain people live on one side of town and others don't, if they don't understand environmental racism, the list goes on and on. We're really setting ourselves up for failure.
It's not just that they're overtaking the curriculum. It's that it's been a decades-long strategy and system to get us there. And so for us to fight, we have to fight in the same way that we got here, which is organizing, grassroots, joining boards, winning all the elections, not just the presidential election every 4 years. We got to do all that stuff to be successful.
When we don't do what Dr. Hill is saying, we also endanger the lives of Black Americans. If you recall, the shooters in the Charleston Church massacre and the shooter in the Buffalo supermarket shooting, both of them believed things that shouldn't be taught in schools. Actually, the opposite, the real history of Black Americans and their experiences in this country. If those things were taught, perhaps those folks who are radicalized to go out and commit this violence, maybe they wouldn't if they knew true history about Black American experience in this country.